every single geologist is just, jacked up to see what's going on, because this is just, you just don't find so many things line up. It's if you think where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, this is a lot of smoke. And to be able to access this in Newfoundland and not in the mountains of Peru or in, a scary place in Mexico, it's just a very unique kind of asset.
All right, everyone. So thanks as always for tuning in. I have the pleasure today to sit down with Matt Wilson, CEO and Director of Sterling Metals. Matt, first time on the show. It's great to meet you and great to have you here to learn about the story. So welcome, and how are things going for you today?
John, thanks a lot for having me. Excited to be here and to be able to share what I think is a pretty exciting story in Sterling Metals. Things are good. Things are, we're seeing an end to kind of this COVID lockdown. I'm here in Toronto, which is like ground zero for it all. And then at Sterling, things are great. We're approaching our maiden drill program, and people are getting pretty excited, and we're rocking and rolling.
Okay, so let's start off with an overview of the company for anyone that hasn't heard about you. Where are you located? What minerals are you looking for?
So Sterling, we are chasing what we like to say is the next great silver district in Canada. We're located in the Great North Peninsula of Newfoundland on the east side. We have currently defined this 12-kilometer long, really distinct trend line of high-grade silver, copper, lead, zinc. And we think what we've got here is a world-class asset that's never been drilled before. And so, we're going to start drilling soon, and hopefully what we can start to define is a high-grade district scale silver and base metal play in a tremendous place to be like Newfoundland. Okay,
and is there a story behind how the company came into possession of this property?
Yeah, there's a pretty fun story behind it. I think any good company usually has a pretty fun story behind it, whether it's tech or it's mining, and this one is no different. So at the end of 2016, a local school principal named Tony Kearney was out for a drive with his son. He's not a prospector, not a geologist. He's driving through the woods. He lives in a town that's about 30 kilometers south, and turns to his right and he sees this green rock in the forest. And this green rock, he knows something is different. People in Newfoundland definitely understand their mining. This has been a strong history of mining there. So he grabs the rock, figures out who he's supposed to take it to, drives 3 hours south to the guys at Altius Minerals. And Altius Minerals has been in Newfoundland for decades, and they're a royalty company. What they do is they purchase assets that have never had any work on them, generally from prospectors. They do really very high quality work on it. And then what they do is they sell the asset for equity stakes and a royalty to juniors like us. So they assayed the rock that Tony brought, and they found 500 grams silver and 2.5% copper. So just, wow, huge grades. And they went up and they staked everything in the region. And then they went on to do a fair bit of work in 2017, preliminary stuff like soils, trenching, things like that. And then with that, what they did is they ended up optioning the project. And where the story gets kind of interesting is they optioned it to Newfound Gold. And Newfound Gold is now pretty well known as a $2 billion company on the other side of the island. But this was going to be Newfound's asset. And Newfound did about $700,000 of geophysical work on the project, spent about a year and a half on it. And part of their terms is they had to grant Altius a bunch of stock, and they had to raise a bunch of money. And silver at the time was $12. Copper was, I don't know, $2. It was a different market 3 years ago. And then not only was it a different market, but when the market started to turn, and they had done all their work, but when it started to turn, they found Queensway. And Queensway, their hole of 20 meters of 100 grams, they were not going to grant Altius any stock for an asset that wasn't Queensway. And so what they ended up doing at the end of 2019 is they gave the asset back to Altius. So Altius had this asset that's had $1.1 million of work done on it. They have this asset that's sitting in their portfolio beginning of 2020. And throughout the year of 2020, I've been CEO of this company, and this company used to be was an old mining company where I ended up selling an asset. And last year I was looking for a new asset, and I was looking for something in Canada specifically because my previous company was in South America, and I wanted something that was safe jurisdictionally. I wanted something that was not going to be impacted the same way by COVID, where I knew that people could operate on it without issue. And so about 4 months later, I was playing golf, having a beer with a good friend of mine who runs the royalty portfolio at Altius. And he and I used to work together. He's been in junior mining for 12 years, really knows his stuff, and now an advisor, Mark Goose. And he says, I've got this asset in the company. We're looking for a partner to do it with, and we know you'll do some good work. And do you want to take a look? And so I took a look at the technical report, which was done by Dr. Stephen Piercy, a Prophet Memorial, who's a very well-renowned geologist. And it was talking about this as the next Keno Hill silver district, which is hundreds of millions of ounces. And so in 9 days, we had an LOI done. We acquired the project October 2nd and kind of just haven't looked back since.
That's an interesting story. And I think, if this ever becomes a mine one day, there'll certainly be quite the story to tell that it was, discovered just kind of out of the blue by a non-geologist just out for a drive, out for a walk in the bush.
You got to have those kind of things happen. Got to get luck and timing, and it all matters when you have things like this.
Yeah. The locals, there'll be all kinds of local stories. Now, I don't know if I'll be able to understand any of those stories, because I know up north in Newfoundland, I've visited before. The accent up there is pretty thick, but I'm sure, they know how to tell a good tale there. So, it would be interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm assuming Altius would have, would there be a royalty on this, Matt?
Yeah, so Tony has a royalty, and Altius has a right to buy 66% of it from him. And then, so as a total royalty on the project, there's a 2% NSR. So nothing super onerous. There's no big issues with that, but it definitely keeps everyone very vested to make it work. And I think that that's really important because Altius is a 14% shareholder of Sterling, but they also have this, potentially a 1.5% royalty that if this is what we think it could be, that's going to be a very profitable thing. So they've been incredible partners, and we've been able to hit the ground running because they've advised us on permitting, advised us on environmental issues, advised us on the geology itself. What's really great is the chief geologist of Altius, who is a tremendous asset. He lives about 3 hours south, and I hate to say it, but COVID was an advantage for us because he couldn't leave the province. And so he ran our fall program. He's been contributing throughout. So with him there, and then we've also had the team that does a lot of the work for Newfound Gold in discovering the asset itself. At Goldspot Discoveries. So Goldspot Discoveries is a company that does exploration work for companies. They're a consulting company that holds assets as well. And they own a bunch of Newfound Gold because they did the work at Queensway. And then they also did a lot of work for Newfound Gold at this asset. And Goldspot's doing a lot of the work for us now and has just been tremendous. They're a big shareholder of ours, big partner. And Denis, who's president of Newfound Gold and chairman of Goldspot, is an advisor here, former colleague of mine, and we work really closely together. So it's a pretty tight-knit group of people who we all honestly just love this asset and want to see what comes of it.
So your ownership, are you at 100% now, or do you have to spend a little bit more before you get 100% outright? Yeah,
so the terms of the deal, we had to grant Altius at the time 19.9%. We had to raise $2 million within a year. We've raised $7 million since we got the asset, so that's done. And then we have to spend $1.5 million over 3 years. We had to spend $500,000 over a year. So we're going to start drilling and we're going to rip through that pretty fast. We have a budget this year of about $2.7 million when it comes to drilling and geology. It's all in flow through money. So it has to go into the ground. So that's all counted towards the asset.
Okay. Infrastructure wise, or how far away are you from, say, roads, power, et cetera, at this location?
Yeah. So maybe if you could just go back a slide, it's a good way to visualize the project itself. So if you look at kind of that patch of dirt that's been filled in, that is the trench site where we found 4,500 grams silver, 15% copper, and 17% lead zinc from a vein. So incredible grades. And if you take a look just past it, that's a highway that runs throughout the entire project from the town up to the airport that's 30 kilometers to the north. So In terms of access, this is as good as it gets. You drive from the town. We're not setting up a camp. Guys are staying in the town. You drive up the highway. You take the drill off of that little dirt road there. You put it on the site, and you're away to drill. So it's an all-season road. And the only reason that we didn't start drilling earlier, aside from kind of needing to do some work over the winter, but like there was never a thought of doing it in the winter because all these veins outcrop at surface. And so we want to make sure that, in our first pass of drilling, we give ourselves the best chance of success as soon as possible. And when you have outcropping veins, it is a very large advantage because you don't have to worry about missing it, really. You're drilling, you're seeing the orientation of it, you're drilling from surface, and you understand where it is. So you can kind of start to put that puzzle together from surface down rather than using GPS and geophysics to try and figure out a target.
Okay, so yeah, it looks like you're pretty well set here. How far away would you be from, say, the nearest town or...
So the nearest town is 20 kilometers, but the nearest larger town is Roddickton. It's 1,500. It's about 1,500 people. It's about 30 kilometers away. That's where everyone is staying. That's where Tony lives, our guy on the ground who found the project. So Tony is our logistics manager. He's on site, so keeping continuity in the story. So pretty close by. I think probably at some point, perhaps we'll have to set up a camp, as 30 kilometers each way is a bit of a trek in the morning. But right now, it's easy.
Okay. So I know you've mentioned it already and it's in your presentation, and I think it's important for people to kind of catch the significance of this. You mentioned that there's a potential comparison to be made here to the Keno Hill Silver District in the Yukon. So for those that might be watching and they might not be familiar with that district and why that's would be, a really good thing if it turns out to be true, can you maybe talk a little bit about Keno Hill and why your property is showing some of the, the similarities that they saw there?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe perhaps we can start, that actually 2 slides before. Perhaps we can start, right here. So the analogy was made by the geologist, the PhD geologist who wrote our technical report, Dr. Stephen Piercy. And what ended up happening after the technical report is that he and his colleague, another PhD, they wrote a report and did a presentation to the Geological Survey of Newfoundland. And this report was all about Sail Pond, and it wasn't commissioned by us. This was just what they were doing, and they were really interested in it geologically. And they went through an isotope analysis, looking at like the DNA of the rock and figuring out the boiling points of the fluids. And well, we haven't drilled yet, so you don't really know, but they went through a fair bit. And that kind of swarm of veining that you see 2 slides from the left, this kind of quartz carbonate veining that carries it's like kind of these really narrow veins that carry this just incredibly high grade of silver, 30 to 50 ounces per ton. And so 900 grams plus. And you're talking, so it's like a bunch of these that kind of swarm together, and they create these really dense pods of mineralization that's hosted in these kind of antimony-rich, galena-rich rock areas. And the Keno Hill deposit, what it was a series of these very small pod-like mines. And if you switch 2 slides down, you see all the orange dots there. Those are mines in the Western District of Keno Hill. The Western District of Keno Hill produced 210 million ounces of silver from 1913 to the year 2000. So massive amounts of silver. And when you think of that, especially in today's context, usually you think of huge amounts of rock being moved. And you think of, giant mines that have to use huge power. These were done in 1913, 1920, 1930, because they're close to surface and they're only 200 to 500,000 tons of rock. So the silver is contained in these incredibly dense packets of ore that you would mine, and they're made up of those kind of quartz carbonate veins. And so the largest mine in this district was the Hector Calamute mine, and it was 100 million ounces of silver, only 2.7 million tons. So the model we're kind of chasing here is that if you take a look, it's a fun slide because it's the same distance, but the trend line that we have right now is 12 kilometers long. And the 12 kilometers is the same as that western side of Keno Hill. And if you kind of slide back a single slide here, and you just check out the geophysics of what we see underneath these kind of high-grade veins that outcrop at surface and our huge soil anomalies that you see. You see these kind of, those pink blobs, those are these distinct gravity anomalies, and those pink blobs are heavy, heavy rock. And so what's interesting about Keno Hill is Keno Hill was described as a galena mine, this rock galena, which is a very heavy rock that just had silver in it. And so we have these really intense anomalies like this that carry the whole way from bottom to top of the trend. And so what we're anticipating as one of the potential models is that we have something like that, where we find these kind of dense packets of these very thin veins that carry just incredibly high grades of silver that equates to very little amount of rock with very high amount of silver. So when we start, and that zinc lead signature that we have, which is extremely high, that carries along because there's a huge zinc and huge lead in the Keno Hill district as well.
Okay, so Keno Hill has that same thing then, Matt, like this group, they're smaller veins, but they're very tightly packed together, like you said, a swarm of them all. So
that's right.
It almost looks like one big vein, but it's really made up of a network of smaller veins.
Yeah, so from everything that I've read and that people are using as comps, so it's a bunch of 30-centimeter veins. So this is like, a ruler, right? Mm-hmm. So not wide at all, except they all kind of swarm together into this packet. And so what we're going to try and do when we drill is it's simple, but it's complicated at the same time, because you have to kind of figure out where these veins go. So if you think about it coming from surface and you're kind of drilling these fingers of veins, if they're orientated like this or like this, then you kind of have to chase it down from surface. And, Newfound Gold actually had to do the same thing. So they have tons of rigs and they had to drill. And as soon as they figured out the orientation of those veins, they were able to kind of follow it down. So our path to kind of finding this stuff is do the same thing. So we start on surface where we know that there's these huge grades of silver, copper, lead, zinc, antimony, all the supportive minerals that go with it, and then kind of try and chase it down to the bottom. And so the big things are the boiling point, the temperature of the veins, the quartz carbonate nature of the veins, and then also the supporting minerals. So cadmium, antimony, which is now apparently a strategic metal in Canada and is the same price as copper. So we have 5% antimony in that sample as well. And then a little bit of the arsenic content as well to kind of support the system. So we have very similar kind of group of those minerals in these same kind of thin veins. And so that's why Dr. Piercy kind of put this analog together. And I think that, it's prudent to say that it's very likely that if this is a district play, that there's probably multiple types of deposits on here. So Keno Hill had epithermal deposits on it. They had a bunch of different things going on. But, there's copper heavy areas, there's silver heavy areas. And so we have a little bit more copper potential in the north, we think, but we don't know yet. We have to drill. We have to figure out what's going on. And I think that, but everything kind of lines up. You have soils that line up with grabs and trenching, and that line up with geophysics. And then you have this world-class analog. And so in terms of a story that is pre-drilling, it's to me, it's as exciting as it gets.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be excited. So obviously I want to talk about, your plans for the 2021 season, but maybe before we do that, we can review a little bit of the work that has gone in before. So obviously we've covered that you've done some gravity geophysics. It sounds like you've done some trenching in some soils. Can you walk us through a little bit, maybe in more detail, exactly what has been done to help, identify the drill targets for this year?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it shows even more clear when you kind of go through that. So if you back up for there. Okay, so in 2017, Altius did 1,500 soils across this grid from bottom to top. Altius used an XRF gun, though, to determine the mineralization. And the thing about XRF guns is that they don't read silver. And they read, they read base metal mineralization, but it's not like you're assaying in the lab, right? So what we did in the winter is we filled in the gaps. No, sorry, they did 4,500 samples. We did 1,500. So we filled in the gaps and we sent them all to the lab. And what we ended up finding is we found silver in a very distinct trend line. And not only that, but we found silver a kilometer north in a soil from that 4,500 gram vein we found 650 grams silver in soils. We also found 0.7% copper in a soil, not on a vein, in a soil sample. We had 2.3% lead in a soil sample. We have these circles that we've kind of highlighted, are these dense areas of mineralization within the soils that makes it really hard to not think, double negative, to not think that there is something going on here. Because one of the great things about silver and copper in relation to perhaps gold is that silver and copper are not very mobile in terms of how they move in soil. So when glaciers kind of swing across, when the wind is moving, when everything is going on, silver and copper stay in place. And so when you see these very high grade, very clustered areas of silver, copper, lead, zinc, and then the chart looks even more full for copper when it comes to antimony and supporting elements like cadmium. So when you see this kind of come together, you can be but you can really hypothesize that there's some sort of geological event that brought this all to surface. And what gets really interesting, you even see it's between two faults, you even see kind of the lakes, they kind of form around the trend line. And so it's like something came to push it up. And that's why the Keno Hill analogy gets so interesting, because it's so linear. And it makes this pod-like trend where it's like it pushes together. It was between two faults as well. So really interesting comparison there. And then when you think about, that's the kind of the footprint, this distinct trend line as a footprint. If you go to the next slide, you start to see these grades coming from surface. So these are not boulders. These are veins that are outcropping at surface, or these are trench results. And so you see at the bottom there, which is where we're going to start drilling, 6,800 grams silver equivalent. That's that 4,500 grams silver, right? So right next to that, you've also got 3,100 grams silver equivalent, which is made up of 2,000 grams silver. So this is not one of those things where you've got 50 grams silver and then everything else makes it up. This is truly a silver-rich area. Mm-hmm. And what gets really exciting though is from those same quartz carbonate veins that you're getting these results from at the bottom, you're also seeing 300 grams silver equivalent 12 kilometers to the northeast, where you see these same soil anomalies. So you've got every indication that there's this really big system that is the same system, the same kind of veining going from bottom to top that carries these incredibly high grades of silver and base metals that made this geological footprint that is the soils. And that's why the geophysics gets so exciting, because you're like, oh, well, underneath all of these pieces is this dense kind of rock. And I mean, it wouldn't matter if it was a huge kind of blob, if you think about it, right? But it's because it's so distinct right underneath all of these outcropping veins and all of these soils that there's such a clear, distinct linear trend. And that's why I think we get so excited about it being a district style play and not kind of a whole bunch of one-offs. It's like the same kind of mineralized system.
Is there a gap in between, like there's the 2 kilometer section, the 7 kilometer section? Is there an elevation difference, or like do the veins right here, if I draw it on the map, like this gap here, is it, the veins just disappear, or is it a higher area of elevation, or what's going on in the middle there?
So I'm going to avoid like hyper geology talk, because that only goes bad. But if you take a look at just the rock type, the gray rock is kind of an underlying. So what is possible is that there's a bit of an overburden there in the middle. It gets a little bit damp. It's kind of a little bit lower in surface. So that just wasn't sampled. And so you've just got this gap of kind of a space. We're pretty, we have no idea if it connects or not. I don't see any reason that it wouldn't, but that just hasn't been done. There hasn't really been any work on it. There's some overburden there. And so the soils wouldn't match up the same way. Okay.
I mean, it's not like you already have 9 kilometers of known strike. It's not like if there wasn't anything there, you'd be sad anyway, but it'd be interesting if it can.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think that what's so great about having had Altius do all this work and spend so much time on this for 4 years, right? I mean, it's a long 4 years on a project without drill hole is a long time. So there's been a lot of thought put into this. And what Altius did when they initially staked all the ground, they actually staked well outside of our property boundaries. They had much more land than we actually have today, but they realized that the rock type that was worth chasing was this. It was inside of our borders. And so what they did is they basically narrowed this to a specific type of rock, specific looks of outcrop. And so that's what we're really focusing on, is what we can see, at surface.
Do you have a good feel for the dip and such just from the trenching work?
Not really. I mean, the veins, I got to be honest. I mean, the veins are kind of, they're a little bit sporadic. I mean, they're better in the south. In the north, they kind of go a little bit all over the place. But I mean, there's a lot of veins at surface that you can trace. And the Gold Spot team has done an amazing job of kind of putting it together. But I think that, you know, that's where drilling comes in. And I think that one of the great things, and I mean, it lends to why I think this is so exciting, is because generally when you have a maiden drill program and you're a new company and you're trying to drill an asset of this type that's never been drilled before, you know, you have 500 grand, you have $1 million bucks, and you know, you're drilling 2,500 meters and you're putting all your eggs into one basket of like, I really hope that I hit what's there. What's so great about this is that we have enough budget in flow through dollars alone to drill 15,000 meters. And our first drill program is 7,500 meters, and we anticipate 10,000 meters this year. And so you're going to need to drill to figure out that orientation. And so our first holes could be 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters, trying to figure that out. And what's great is because it outcrops, you can at least start from the top and figure it out. But I think that there is going to be an element of trying to, you know, you're drilling here and then you step out and you come in, and you step out this way and you come down. And so you're really going to have to scissor these holes to be able to get that orientation, because when you're dealing with this small packet of ore that you're chasing, it's great because from a mining cost level, it would be unheard of. But when it comes to drilling, it makes it a little bit harder to find, because you don't have this huge, you don't have a giant porphyry target where when you drill, you're going to drill it, you're going to hit it no matter what. You're drilling to find these very tight packets of these narrow veins. And so essentially we're going to have to test it. We're going to have to drill down. So I think that's why it's so great. We got amazing drill crew, an amazing team on site, and it's you know, those first few holes. I mean, you get lucky if you hit on the first few holes, but I think that like if it's there, I'd like to say that we're going to find it if it's there, because we have the budget, the team. But it definitely is. It's going to be a little bit of work to chase that orientation. And I mean, hopefully at the very beginning we get pretty lucky. Was any IP geophysics done on this? Yeah, there's IP that's been done, and I don't have that in the deck here. In our most recent press release, there is the resistivity bodies of that's shown from the IP work. The lead geophysicist at Gold Spot is absolutely brilliant, and she redid this amazing survey that Gold Spot did and Newfoundland Gold did in 2018. And you see the IP, that these like packets of rock, that the IP lines up perfectly with the trend lines that you're going after. So different kind of survey, but it definitely lines up with the gravity, with the soils and the gravs. So the soils, the grav, the IP, everything is kind of supporting each other. It all lends together, and then the big question is, can you find a mineable width? Right? Can you drill and find mineable widths? And I think that's why, you know, we have these 4 big sites of drill areas. And what's great is that once we figure out one, because it's a homogeneous kind of thing, and because you've got, I think that was our lead technical geologist, because you've got the same kind of veining from bottom to top, same kind of geophysics from bottom to top, same kind of alignment. What's great about this is that if we hit once, you start to be able to say and extrapolate and say, well, it is the same. It is going out. So what we're going to end up doing is trying to focus on one area to start. And I think that like you have multiple shots at it for sure. But yeah, everything lines up as well as I've been doing this 12 years, and this is as good a pre-drilling target as I've seen. Okay, so good point to switch to let's talk about 2021 exploration plans. You've already mentioned, you know, 7,500 meters is your plan. That sounds like it's fully budgeted, and you have room in the budget to go up to double that if you want. Yeah. How many drills, and when would you be starting drilling? So we're going to start drilling in June, and we've got one rig. I know the thing these days is to have multiple rigs on your project. And that's great. I think that for something that's never been drilled, for me, bang for your buck is really important. I want to be able to drill, figure out the orientation, get the assays, keep going. And so we have a great drill crew, world-class guys that have done this a lot. And so we're gonna have one rig. You estimate about 2,000 meters a month to be conservative. and we're going to start drilling in June. And essentially, the drills don't stop turning once we start going. And I mean, there's always room to add another rig. Obviously, you can only have a drill in one place at once. But what is great though is because it's this quartz carbonate nature of the veins, you're going to see if you're right. Like you're going to see it. You're going to see the veining kind of drop down. And so it does make it great because you're chasing this kind of mineralization, and so you don't necessarily have to wait for the lab to get back to you. You're going to still chase those veins down. But what's also great is that the lab that we're going to ship the samples to is only 3 hours south as a drive. So you're throwing throw the samples in a truck. You're driving them down. You're putting them in the lab and getting a turnaround that should be pretty quick. So I think that that's the plan. Just have one kind of get going and move it as needed. I mean, we still have 4 sites that we want to test, but obviously, if you start hitting in the first one, you're probably not moving.
And the 4 sites matter
those circles.
The circles.
Yeah, you got it, right?
And the south one is the first target.
South one is the first target, and I mean, I think that that's a good time to put this into context. I mean, the south target is 2 kilometers long. I mean, if you go to Kirkland Lake and you start to look at gold deposits, there's 3 mines in 2 kilometers. And it's the 2 kilometers long is enormous target when you're talking about a new trend line. So, you could spend a long time drilling 2 kilometers. And so I think that, we've got multiple targets within that 2 kilometer range. And so I think one of the challenges for us will be kind of like, we really want to test the extent of this trend. And so getting those assays back, figuring out where it is. I mean, the idea is if you visually find something, you're going to keep chasing it. But like we are planning to move the rig from bottom to top because we do want to see what's up north as well. Because the north is that's a 7 kilometer trend line of just amazing targets. So, there's a possibility that we kind of stop where it gets really good and move up while the assays kind of come back. So that's kind of a as it goes, play by ear kind of thing. But those are the 4 targets that we're pushing on now.
Do you have any sense for how deep you would be drilling the hole?
Yeah, so the average drill hole we'd like to say is 200 meters. These geophysical targets, so the Keno Hill deposit, it goes down 350 meters. The other comp that is that Dr. Piercy makes is the Coeur d'Alene Silver District, which is in Idaho, which is 1.2 billion ounces of silver. That goes way deeper. That's like 1,500 meters below the ground. So we're not drilling 1,500 meters holes. But I think that, it is possible that we start, we want to target a couple of those gravity anomalies that might be 300-400 meters down. I think that it's a little bit of, we've got 15,000 meters of drill plan, like as holes go. But I think that we're staying flexible with it. That's with one rig and a close team. It's easy to do that. But yeah, we like to say about an average of 200 meters.
Okay. And your drill crew, your geologists, from a personnel standpoint, everybody's locked down for the season. You have not going to have issues finding people?
No, that sure is an issue, though. I've heard from a lot of people, and I think that reminds me of a bit of the Yukon gold rush back in 2011 when no one could even book a helicopter to get there. So we jumped on this really early. We made sure that we focused on the best teams that we could find, working with Mercator Geology and Logan Drilling. They're good. Logan Drilling has a rig on the province. They were just doing a drill campaign in the Central Gold Belt, so no issues there. And Mercator, actually our project lead that's on site, had worked the project in 2017, went to Memorial. So a lot of people that understand the area, understand the project type, and they're all locked down, no issues there.
Okay. Do you have to do, or will you be doing any more geophysics this season in conjunction with the drilling, or are you pretty happy with where you are on that front?
Yeah, so if you slide back, you'll notice that our gravity anomaly stops. The one survey that was not done by Newfoundland was a gravity survey. It was a little tiny one that was done, and they did it. Let me just kind of put this in here. So the survey that they did was just this. And that was around essentially where that great trench was, which makes sense that you had the gravity lines there. What we ended up doing is we were expanding it way up north here, right? So we wanted to do this because that's where that soil anomaly is, where we found that 650 grams silver and 0.7% copper. So you're dealing with really big grades, as you can kind of see from the lead samples that we have here. So the gravity anomaly, though, so we had to stop we tried to get that all done. We had to stop because the weather got really warm in Newfoundland. And so when it gets marshy, you can't have those lines being drawn. So what we ended up doing is we said, go home. They're going to come back pretty soon, actually, and finish up this gravity survey so it covers the entirety of the property. Because we have kind of light lines that show that these gravity anomalies go with each trend, but we're going to show that it is a distinct bottom to top, much like the IP is.
Okay. And what kind of mood or level of excitement are you seeing from the geologist team as you prepare to drill?
I think that the best, the best credit to this project is that anyone who's worked on this over the last 4 years has done whatever they can to keep working on it. Denny is jumping into this. Goldspot jumps into this. Even Kelly Malcolm is the VPX of Amex Exploration, which is a great gold story in Quebec. He's running our exploration program for us. He's seen this project. He understands it. And I think that every geologist that I know, they might disagree on the theory of what's there. But every single geologist is just, jacked up to see what's going on, because this is you just don't find so many things line up. It's if you think where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, this is a lot of smoke. And to be able to access this in Newfoundland and not in the mountains of Peru or in, a scary place in Mexico, it's just a very unique kind of asset. And to have it never been drilled before and to own 100% of what could be a district. This could be, if you're looking at this as a string of pearls kind of mine sort of analogy. And I mean, you're talking multiple different deposits. And so to have 100% of this, where you could be looking at, mining this for a very long time, it gets people very excited. And so there's not one geologist that I've talked to that is not excited about the project.
It's always a good thing to hear when the geologists get pretty excited. There's something of interest there, right? So
yeah, it'd be very bad if they weren't excited.
You talked about the lab. It's 3 hours south of you, I believe you said, by driving. You would have used them, I'm assuming, in the fall or the winter when you did your assays. What was the turnaround time like on those?
Yeah, they were great. They were quick, even with the drill core that was going in. I mean, we've reached out with them. We talked about how we can get a quicker turnaround. They assure us of, doing X, Y, and Z, that we can make sure that we try and get some quick turnarounds. I think that, it's all about having that relationship and making sure that you have this constant schedule ahead of time. And so I think that the biggest issue I always saw in kind of junior mining exploration companies is they kind of waited for things to happen and then dealt with them. And so we've jumped ahead of the game, made sure we have that kind of understanding that we're going to have these constant samples going in. We want to have capacity to do it. So they seem very capable of taking it on and turning it around.
Okay. Wanted to switch gears maybe for a moment, talk about yourself and the rest of the management and advisory team. I mean, you've touched on it a little bit already in our discussion, but obviously, having the right people involved with the project is, a big reason for it being successful. Can you maybe give the audience a little bit of background on some of the, not in detail, but just who do you think the key players are, and how have you all sort of set the company up for success in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that like any venture company, people are very important. This was a different company before. This was a gold explorer in Paraguay. And, when you have people involved who are vested and who have been in the space for a while, you know that you're going to find something else that's really good, even if the one project doesn't work. So my background, I spent 12 years investing and kind of being in the small cap mining space. I started at a fund called Pine Tree Capital. Pine Tree owned everything under the sun in the junior space. I think when I joined, we owned 496 companies in junior mining. And so I come from a finance background. That's my education. And I've been investing in these things for 12 years. And then 5 years ago, I started running companies and moving it forward. But I mean, so my perspective is this as an investment more than anything at the beginning of it, and then running it efficiently, making sure the best bang for your buck. But obviously the people that are the most important are the people that are going to make sure that when we drill, we actually get something. So the team behind that is, so as I had mentioned, Kelly Malcolm, he's running our exploration. He is the VPX of Amex Exploration. Amex is a company that's doing about 200,000 meters of drilling in Quebec. You know, they just came out with results of 4 meters of 70 grams gold. He's an old Detour gold guy, very experienced guy, 12 years. kind of same age as me, gung-ho, pushing forward on this. And then the team at Goldspot is extremely important to us, as they've been doing a ton of the work, reprocessing all the data and giving us drill targets. And so the Goldspot team, again, they do a lot of the work for Newfound Gold at their Queensway project. They did the work initially at this project. And then the other technical advisor that we have on the advisory board is Denis Laviolette, who is president of Newfound Gold and chairman of Goldspot. And Denis and I worked together at Pine Tree for a couple of years back in 2013. And then the other advisor who runs the royalty book at Altius is Mark Raguse, and he and I were analysts together at Pine Tree. So again, it's kind of like a bunch of us who've been around, kind of seen we all started kind of in the bull market of 09 and 10, and then had this dreary 8 years. And then we all know this project and we all want to be part of it. And so this is a real kind of team effort on our parts, where the people that are pushing it forward are we're all choosing to be here, and we all want to push. We all kind of want this to work because we all get so excited about it. But then, of course, you need people who have been around for a little bit longer. And so our chairman is Richard Patricio, and Richard and I have worked together for about 12 years. He's another ex-Pine Tree guy. He is the CEO of Mega Uranium, on the board of Next Gen Uranium. Next Gen is probably the best undeveloped asset in the world. He has been part of hundreds of millions of dollars of capital raises and is a great asset. And then Stephen Keith is another board member. He's a geologist, sold a phosphate company for $150 million in Brazil in 2012, and has just been around for a while. So a lot of people who have been around, raised capital, understand kind of how you're supposed to push things forward, conscious of dilution, conscious of ownership, and but a technical team that is just fit for a much larger company than we are. When you bring in Kelly and you have the Goldspot team, and then honestly, it's worth noting again that because Altius is our partner and they own 14%, the chief geologist lives 3 hours south. I mean, it's terrific because that chief geologist is driving up to see the beginning of the drill program and make sure things are going right. And so, Altius is a $500 million company, and so you have a team between Goldspot, the Altius advisory, you have Kelly. I mean, you just have a group of people that are just very knowledgeable, and so to find that in kind of a company that's worth whatever our market cap is worth today is pretty rare. So it's an exciting. It's exciting to know that as we push this forward, we're not going to mess it up.
Yeah, so good mix there, I think, and 32 million cap as of close today.
All right.
So let's switch to the capital markets side of things. You've done a couple raises in the last year since you've incorporated this asset. Both of them were oversubscribed by 20%, and the last raise you did in April, I believe, was done at a 70% premium to the one that you did in mid-December. So that's obviously good to see. How comfortable are you with the cash position? I believe it shows on this slide here, 5.5 million. And, when do you expect that you might have to go back to the market for more capital? I know we've touched on this already, that, there's some room to expand the drill program to potentially double what you're already budgeting, but how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I think it's, we're in a really fortunate position as a junior company. We have a non-project burn that's very, very low. We only have 3 or 4 people that work for the company that are not geologists. Small office in Toronto, so all the money that we have generally goes into the ground. Of the raises that we did, so we did a raise in December at 30 cents with a 35 cent flow-through component to it, and there was a 45 cent full warrant. And so that warrant comes due next December, so December of 22. So there's $5 million of warrants that are due at 45 cents that are all currently in the money. So we have $4 million, let's say, of flow-through budget for this project. And so, the last raise we did in March with Canaccord acting as an advisor, that was a hard component at 52 and a flow-through at 57. And there's a full warrant at 78 that you see from March of 2023. And so when you take into account the possible warrant proceeds that can kind of come in, and the fact that we have $4 million of budget to drill this project, you start to look at the drill cost, which is $200 a meter. Make it $250 just for contingency's sake. And so you have a huge budget to really see what you have here. And I mean, if we start to hit, given the nature of the deposit, or what could be a potential deposit, given the fact that it's the same from bottom to top, you can extrapolate that there's something much bigger there once you start to find it. I think that people will respond really well. And I think that, you look at some volume in the stock that's happening right now and people are getting pretty excited. And so I would expect that if we do hit, that you're going to get a move. It's a tight share structure, 47 million shares out. And I think that, we should be fine for cash. I mean, in general, warrants will start to come in. And we have great institutional support, but, there's a large appetite for silver from, everyone from large mining funds to people like Eric Sprott that have not written new checks for this deal. And so I think that when we do start hitting that will be an incredibly interesting investment appetite. So I don't anticipate that there will be, that overhang retail kind of like raise where you get really worried because it's open for a long time. The stock sells off. And you have people, even when the 4-month hold comes off, that everyone's selling. And I think that was a key component to our March raise where it was 10 subscribers, mostly institutionally based. So you're not going to have that kind of same drop off that you would have that we saw basically in April. And so I'm very confident in our cash position. We have those warrants to come in. And I think that, being in Canada, you always have access as well to like strong flow through components. And we have the best funds that already own the stock and have been great supporters to date. So I think one of the great things about this is that the money is there. And so you don't have that risk of, we hit something and then I go out and I have to push the market and say, look, we need to raise more money. And so the stock goes down. I think that when we hit something, there is no need to raise money. And so that's not a worry here as we kind of just short up our cash position.
Yeah, it's obviously nice to have almost 5 million in warrants just basically sitting in the money that if you have any sort of good hit, you can count on at least that much, right? If not more, depending on how high the price goes. Clearly I'll just highlight here, it should be obvious to anyone seeing the chart. This is the price chart. You've had a big increase in liquidity since, the placement in December would have come free trading somewhere around here in April.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see that. So it's actually kind of been a good thing for the company, big increase in volume and, everybody likes liquidity. Liquidity is a good thing. People want to be able to get in and get out. And, the prices recovered nicely, I would say, on really nice volume. So I'm sure you're happy with that.
Yeah, it's been a real a testament to the story. And I think just the team and how we've put work together because, that happens. When you do a deal at 30 cents and the stock's at 60 cents, especially when you just raised more, I mean, people are going to sell. That's what happens in the space. And I don't think there's any reason to get upset about that. But there was a lot of stock that came onto the market in that little 2-week span. And, it dropped down to 40 cents, but there was 3 million shares or so that got sucked up by the market. And I'd like to think that those people would be believers in this story because you're buying it in the market. You're there at 40 cents. And so for it to rebound like this, to see these constant volumes kind of push forward, it's a real, it makes me really excited for when we do hit, or if we do hit, what could potentially happen because there's clearly a lot of eyes on the story and a lot of great supporters in our shareholder base.
Were there any strategic investors in that last raise? Matt, I think you said only nine subscribers, right? Participants?
Yeah. So I think that there were strategic investors from our perspective. I mean, I guess when you say for strategic, you think, large silver companies. So that hasn't happened. I think that would have to be disclosed, but I'm not going to disclose anyone that is under 10%. But like I said, it was, I think the majority of, there was 3 that were smaller, but for the most part, it was large check sizes. This was not a marketed deal. This was done in about a week. It just took a little bit longer to close. And so it was done because the people that came to the table said, I want to be involved in this story. And I know these people, and I know that they're tremendous shareholders and people that you want to be involved if you're an exploration company going forward.
Okay. You mentioned in the corporate presentation, you have over 50% ownership between, institutional shareholders and management insiders. Can you talk about some of the key shareholders? I believe you've already mentioned Altius. They were originally almost a 20% shareholder. They've been diluted down to 14. Anybody else? Goldspot, I think you mentioned as well.
Yeah, so Altius has 14. I mean, the guys at Goldspot have 5. Eric Sprott owns 7.5. Eric owns it from a legacy position when we were a South American exploration company. And so, that's a blessing and a curse because, it's been great to have him involved. We haven't drilled a hole. He's obviously He's the leader in the silver space right now for sure. But we're confident that if we start drilling, we start hitting, that it's going to be a nice reunion that way. But he's aware of the story. He knows that it's going forward. He knows that we're starting to drill. Gold spot, then when you put management and advisors together, it's 10, 15%. And you take the flow funds that have come in, or the best flow funds you can get, it's another 7%. And then I think that sometimes that structure gets misconstrued because you start dealing with just institutions. But we've had incredible support from high net worth shareholders that own 2%, 3% of the company, and brokers out of a few different shops that own 9, 10% of the company. And I think that when you start to look at the actual float and kind of shares that come out, it's, the float is much more like 35%, even though they're not insiders in management.
Right. Yeah. So you already have you have a nice tight share structure as it is. And with that, all that institutional ownership, it's going to trade a lot tighter even than, what it shows, right? Which is a good thing, I guess. If you get some nice hits off the get-go, that's probably going to, treat everyone that owns shares well, I would think, with that shares, with that float.
Well, it was really important to make sure that when we had to roll this back and restructure the company in August of last year, and to make sure that you were, the deal we did to clean it up had no warrants on it. It was done by 6 people. And I think that it's important to maintain that capital structure, because when you just have too many shares outstanding, there's too much to eat up, right? And you just don't get that torque on the stock that you can really get when you're in a venture space. And I mean, there's pros and cons to being a listed company in a venture space. And so I think that if you can keep that capital structure tight with supportive shareholders, then when you do something that's great, you can get a really big share boost from it. And I think that I learned that really early on in my days at Pine Tree, is that capital structure is very important.
Okay, so in terms of getting the story out, what have you done in the past? And I guess, what are you looking to do to increase those initiatives going forward? I believe you did a presentation with the folks at Red Cloud last week. Did you get good attendance at that?
Yeah, really good response. Surprised that there was a lot of people there for a pre-drilling story. So that was really great. I think there's some good eyeballs on it. We have good people that we're working with in terms of getting the story out there, making sure that everyone sees it. I talked to a lot of different, whether it's brokers or high net worth people that love junior mining, and no one's really heard the story. And so I think that my job more than anything is I'm basically just a salesman at this point, and leave the operations to people that really know what they're doing. And so it's been great. The response has been really good. Everyone I tell the story to says, naturally, I wish I had gotten in earlier, but I think that everyone's recognizing that this still has a lot of room to grow. And I think that, there's a really good social media following that we have. There's a good context in terms of new media that we kind of get out there. And yeah, the Red Cloud Silver Conference that's coming up in the middle of June will be there. I mean, Canaccord was our advisor in March, so we anticipate working with them. And see, Red Cloud just launched a research initiation report on us today. So I think that there's going to be, we're working pretty hard to make sure that when this does happen, that when we do hit, that enough people know about it. We now have a new OTC listing. Make sure that the large investor market in the US that is especially keen for silver is aware and able to buy and trade the stock in US dollars especially. So we're seeing already good liquidity on the OTC since Monday. It trades 70 to 100,000 shares a day, which is really great. So I think it's just little things that kind of compounds as you go along with the story. And so making sure that, it's a tough time right now because everything's virtual, not able to see people sit down. And so this, for example, is a tremendous opportunity to kind of reach a new shareholder base, and hopefully people watch this and say, oh yeah, that's a good story. I should pick up a few shares to make sure that I know that I'm part of this when it gets going.
Okay. So it sounds like kind of a broad base trying to, reach retail and institutional in both Canada and the US, like pretty broad base trying to get the word out.
Yeah, we have a great shareholding in Europe as well, actually, between Germany, Amsterdam, and Belgium. Like a really tremendous, we have a Frankfurt listing. I don't know who trades on it, but we do. But it's been a really, it's really great to see kind of the variety, like across nations, basically, people understand what we're chasing here, and that if we hit, it's going to be a really big deal. So I think that, the best marketing is always word of mouth. And I think that if we've seen anything from the last year and we've learned anything from kind of the way the market works today, it's no longer really about kind of like 4 institutions coming in and buying your stock and pushing it up and all that. It's really about much more of a mass community that kind of follows the story and feels involved and gets to be part of it and kind of gets to see what goes from bottom to top. So I think that, we try and work really hard to make sure that we connect with people. And I always encourage people, in our mail distribution, there's an ability to book a meeting with me anytime. So you just book it through Calendly and you set a time and I'm there. So I always love talking about the story. And I think that, whether you own 100 shares or you own 1 million shares, I think it's really important that you kind of understand and feel that this is something new, because this is really from ground up. And with what we're chasing, this could be an incredibly special asset in Canada. So I would encourage people to reach out that way.
Okay, so that's done through the website then, Matt?
Yeah, so there's a way to contact us on the website. I don't have kind of a subscribe to mail thing on the website because I get a little bit too much junk mail that way. But generally what people do is they put in a message, contact, and then I write back, it goes to our info, and then it's me writing back to you. I try and get back to you as soon as I can, and then I'll add you to the mail list, and then we have MailChimp distribution that goes out, and I try and stay very constant with that, and make sure that there's communication. There's blurbs from me all the time, a lot of videos. I'm trying to make sure that we have a lot more vocal communication, so it's not just reading press releases, which are pretty boring in general. So, but I encourage on the site. We go to sterlingmetals.ca. You can also DM me on Twitter at the @SterlingMetals account. And then I try and respond to that as quickly as possible.
Okay. Well, Matt, very interesting story. It's been great to meet you and to talk about this. I know I'll certainly be keeping my eye on it. I can see why there's some appeal to a lot of investors on the story. And, like you said, June, right? We're basically there. This is the end of the May right now when we're filming this. I mean, you'll be drilling this in no time. So, hopefully you hit some good holes right off the bat. Any closing remarks you want to leave with viewers? You want to summarize things, the primary reasons to invest, or any?
Yeah, I think that this really, when you're dealing with something that's never been drilled before, there's really check boxes to tick off that manage your risk versus reward. And, you want to have something that has world-class size potential. You want to have something that has world-class grades. You want to have something where the country's government isn't going to take it away. You want to have something where you can drive to site in all times of year that doesn't deal with, massive drill costs and helicopter costs. You want to have a team that knows how to execute, and really you want to have a commodity that you want to be in. And I think that what's really great is that there are a lot of great gold stories out there, especially in Canada. There's tremendous gold stories. There's not a lot of silver stories, and specifically silver, copper-based metal stuff. So I think that when you kind of tick all those boxes, the reason that I at least get so excited about this is because it has that unique characteristic to it that can kind of create that extra premium and valuation when things get going. So hopefully you all see that as well, and come along for the ride. It's going to be a really fun one.
Okay, sounds great. Well, once again, Matt, thank you for your time, for joining us today, and wish you and the team the best of luck.
Thanks a lot, John. I really enjoyed being here.
Okay, cheers.